Welcome to Anatomical Gangster. I am excited for this conversation with my dear friend, Michael Bilkis, whose wife is one of my very, very best friends for, I hate to say it, but I think, Michael, it's like almost 30 years. I
Well,
know.
neither of you have aged at all.
Exactly. We're still looking like we're in our 20s. And this year we're going to Costa Rica with a beautiful group of, I think, 65 people. And I reached out to Michael and Hillary to say, hey, would you guys come and maybe do some sessions? And one of the things Michael said he would do are tarot readings. And quick background story of Michael. Michael, you started out as a dermatologist, an MD, and over the years have really tried, I think, in your medical practice, trying to create a more holistic approach and frequently running into the problem that people just want a pill. And
Exactly.
yeah, and interesting, I think a lot of people really have a hard time with self-care. People say, oh, well, taking care of myself is difficult. I'm like, yeah, but in some ways it isn't. When you make it proactive, it actually becomes something pretty powerful. But can you speak a little bit about that journey of being a medical doctor and then realizing there's just such a holistic approach that you wanted to take care of, and talk a little about that?
Oh, absolutely. So that my journey began, I hate to say it, 1986 is when I got my license.
Wow.
Beth Israel Hospital in New York City, doing my internship. And then I went on to do my residency in dermatology. So I set out to be a great cosmetic doctor and make lots of money. And, there's an old joke, how do you make God laugh? Tell her your plans. So I made plans, God laughed. And and a few years later, after I'd gone into practice, I was studying martial arts, actually learning how to beat people up. And one of the black belts came in and said, if you're learning to hurt people, it's important to learn a healing system to balance it out.
Hmm.
And this is 1991, I believe. And he said a friend of his was teaching something called Reiki. Now, today, Reiki is a household word, even though people don't always know what it is, but they've heard of it. Back then, none of us had ever heard of this thing.
We'll
So,
define it for everyone, because I bet people listening are still like, what the heck is that?
so Reiki is a form of laying on hands either remotely or in person, and help having a healing energy come through to start to untangle all the knots that are creating disharmony and disease in people. Founder, it was originally rediscovered in a Buddhist temple a long, long time ago by a Buddhist monk named Mikao Usui, and he started the whole thing. And so about six of us from this martial arts class all went to take this class without knowing anything about it. And then we did the second level of training where I learned how to do remote healings or send energy to people anywhere in the world. And lo and behold, I had some friends with bronchitis. I had a friend with back pain. I said, can I try this thing out just for fun, for shits and giggles? And she said, sure. The next morning she woke up, her bronchitis was gone. So I said, okay, there's something here. So then I went, jumped in, held my nose, jumped in, didn't even look. I studied with shamanic healers. I studied hypnosis and became certified as a hypnotherapist. And I kept looking for ways to like, now, how do I create health in my patients? I always told them, my object for you is to make me obsolete,
Mm.
which is not the
Right.
American way for physicians.
For sure. Or most therapists for that matter. Like
Yeah.
they're like, oh, if I get them well, they're not going to come back to me anymore. I remember thinking that when I developed melt, I was like, well, if I develop a self-care technique, I'll be unemployed. But that was not the case, right? When you really can empower somebody with their own healing potential and get people to realize that the body's designed to heal and to reawaken that, I think that's a really powerful gift that you're giving someone.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. And I just continue to struggle. How do I introduce this into a medical practice? And I've had patients complain to me when I talk to them about stress that they didn't come to see a therapist, they came to see a dermatologist, not realizing or not accepting that stress is probably the primary cause of all disease. And then
Right,
diet is number two.
right.
So this was my struggle. And then a big change in my life happened in 2008 when well, actually, it was 2007 when my wife met this man doing a continuing education workshop. And he introduced me to the Mankind Project, which is a men's organization helping to transform men and make the world a better place, one man at a time.
So beautiful. It's so needed in this day and
Oh,
age.
gosh, it's so
More
much.
now than ever. I feel like we're in this gender identity crisis world, and I think we're getting further away from truly knowing how to be a man and to be a sensitive man, but a strong man. And I think that's missing so terribly in this
It,
generation, in our
it's been missing for
generation.
a long time.
Yeah.
I was raised, don't cry or I'll give you a reason to cry.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And what I learned on my training, when tears were strolling down my eyes, flowing rapidly and profusely, a man said to me, "Those are tears of a warrior. Be proud of them." And that was the first time anybody ever told me it's okay to cry,
Yeah.
and let alone celebrate it. So
Yeah.
it was really transformational for me. That was 2008, May 2008. It was close to my anniversary. My wife said go, and because it was a present for both of us. And since then, I have continued to go back. I've staffed now 38 new warrior training adventures. Last November, I became certified as a co-leader in the project. So now I'm one of the 3 to 4 certified men in charge of the training.
Mm.
And I keep coming back because I keep seeing miracles, not only for the participants, but for the staff. So it's not just for the participants, the staff get something too. They
Of
find
course.
it. Um,
Yeah,
I'd say the pinnacle of my career doing this was when my son, Joshua, and you know Josh,
of course.
he did the training back in April with me. And
Yeah.
all I can say is it created a bond between the two of us without, violating any of his confidentiality. Every dollar I'd ever spent became worth it in that moment when he told me he
So
forgave me
beautiful.
for everything I'd ever done.
Mm. So powerful. And, I always think forgiveness isn't about letting bygones be bygones. I always feel like forgiveness, that, true forgiveness has to do with acceptance and seeing each other for the why.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important in
Yeah.
any
I
relationship, right?
I find this whole new age, you have to forgive to move on.
Mm.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I think I have to let it stop affecting my life.
Yes, exactly.
I have to let go of it. But if
Yes.
someone hurt me,
Yes.
someone stabbed me in the back, I don't have to forgive them. If they haven't come to me for atonement and really changed, no, forgiving them is just out of the question. But I could say, you no longer affect me, and I can heal the trauma so that I don't carry it around in my head anymore.
Yeah,
That's healing.
yeah, a lot of times that we end up anchoring in what someone said, or we're living our life because of how somebody told us we needed to be. I think of, like, I mean, that really, is almost a thing I think of with my dad, like, why can't you just fit in and be like all the other kids? And I'd be like, okay, let me try to do that. And I just got pegged out because I wasn't being my true, authentic, weird self. And
Right.
I kind of think, well, weird is kind of supernatural. So I'm like, okay, I'll take that as
And
okay, I'm
and
weird.
so that beautiful part of you then get pushed into the shadows where you learn that's not good.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
healing
you're
is
weird. Yeah,
bring out. Now, do you know the origin of the word weird?
yeah, supernatural.
It means of destiny or spirit.
Yeah,
So, like for Macbeth, Macbeth, your weird is upon you, meaning your destiny is upon you. So, being weird is being spirited. It's being someone who can rise above destiny and
Mm.
and write their own story going forward. So, yeah, call me weird all day long. I'll be happy for it.
That's so true. And I think that this, one of these organizations that you're working with, John Guarnaschelli, who is no longer with us, had On the Common Ground. And this was a men's group to, again, allow men to explore being a man and what role that is of being a father, a husband, a best friend, a self, and giving, I think, new language, new tools. You just, I think it's one of these things we just, okay, I'm a man, I'm a woman, and now there's, whatever you are, the theys in the world. Um, and then just being who we are and the acceptance of self. I think that this is not as obvious as people maybe it might sound coming out of me. Of course, I know who I am, but do you really, So I feel like these types of organizations can really help to allow someone's true self to rise up and to be comfortable with whomever they are, however they feel themselves to be, and own that. I think there's a big piece of that, right?
Absolutely. And men need to work with men. Women need to work with women. Um, if men are the perpetrators, then there's no way that we could ever work with women to help facilitate your healing.
Hmm.
And women who have perpetrated on men, mothers, sisters, teachers, we need someone that doesn't do that triggering so that we can do our healing work.
Yeah.
We could talk honestly. And that's really important. And that's made a huge difference in my life. It's been such a gift for me and my family.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I've known Michael and Hillary for half of my life, over half of it, in so many ways, right? And I've seen you grow and transform and use these tools because of how they came through you authentically, and then being able to carry that out to other people in so many different ways, not just with the men's work, but you also do EFT. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That is the thing. That's the technique that got me out of the medical industry
Mm.
because that was the piece I've been looking for with all the other techniques I'd studied. What can I do to affect change fairly quickly with people? So, emotional freedom technique, invented in 1975 by Gary Craig, is a technique that combines exposure therapy, talking about your traumatic experience, with tapping on the acupuncture endpoints.
Mhm.
And the tapping is sending a signal to a part of your brain called the amygdala. And I know, being a anatomic weird nerd that you are, you know the amygdala. The amygdala is that part
Fear
that
reflex.
senses danger.
Yeah.
And so it red flags, the trauma red flags. So when things happen in your life in the current, even if it has nothing to do with that previous event, if it's similar, it says danger, danger. And we go into a trigger. We get angry. Why do I get angry? Because I'm in danger. I need to push you away.
Mhm.
Or I get afraid. And so then I shrink back.
Mhm.
Or I go into a shame spiral. So the tapping helps to, if you think of the emotion, the two ways I think of this, either an emotion, memory has an emotional charge, and by tapping, you're decreasing the charge like on a capacitor until it collapses to zero,
Mm.
and then it doesn't affect you anymore. Or trauma, whether it's being yelled at as a little kid and saying, "Who do you think you are? You're not so special," just because you want a toy, but now you've internalized that I'm not anybody special.
Mm.
Or, you have to try to fit in, like in your example with your dad. You're not right who you are. You have to fit in with the other kids.
Right.
So that's like your dad or my dad downloading these emotional viruses like a computer virus that
Yeah.
takes over our divine inherited operating system. So emotional freedom technique, I become like Norton or McCaffrey. I go in, I help identify where those are, and the tapping helps to pull them out. and it makes such a significant change in people's lives. And quickly, most clients I work with, maybe 4 to 12 weeks is enough for simple problems. Someone who's been really gone through the ringer emotionally, they're going to need longer. Um, a single traumatic event like a car accident or a mugging or something like that, maybe 2 or 3 sessions at max could be enough to clear it. So this is powerful work.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times with, I call them thought viruses, right? You have a belief that somehow is encoded in you, and now even though you're saying, I want to have a healthy relationship, I want to have love, I want to have these things, it's almost as if there's this block that inhibits you from ever having that, and you're not even aware that the steps and the actions that you're taking in the present moment are actually you living in the past and reacting to things because of past experiences. So you're not living very presently. And I think that this is an awakening using EFT. There's all sorts of different types of techniques, but I think EFT is being such a quick way to change the circuitry in a sense, to break those and become aware of them, and attuning your awareness to the fact of, oh, well, why wouldn't I feel that way when this person is coming at me like this? Gosh, they're just like my dad and how my dad would speak, right? And so you suddenly, I think this is where meditation has helped me a lot, is to learn to become an observer in the process of observation on that which is observed, and recognizing that those triggers exist. And I think of my mom on that. My mother would say things, I'd be like, Linda, why can't you just this, that, or the other thing? And now I'm not triggered by it anymore. I just think in my mind, oh, there that thing is again. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
And we move on. I think
and
that's
that's the
the deal.
difference between judgment and discernment.
Mm,
So judgment is when I have a strong emotional charge. So if anybody does anything and I have a strong judgment and there's emotion, that's a hint for me to say, okay, this is alive within me.
mm.
If I'm discerning, then there's no emotion attached to it. So like you just said, oh, there's mom doing her mom thing again, but you don't get triggered by it. So you've been able to get that stuff out of you, let go of those thought viruses.
Yes, indeed. And I think that's a real big deal. I think that really allows you to live more presently and have better relationships, not just with other people, but also with yourself. I think that's a really important
Oh, absolutely.
piece of it.
I can say, and I have my wife's permission to say this, emotional freedom techniques saved my marriage
Yeah.
and saved my relationship with my kids.
Yeah.
Um, it was, I was filled with rage. I know it's hard to tell that I was filled with rage, but I was so filled with rage because I was so injured. And I didn't know that until I started to heal the rage. And working with emotional freedom, I worked with this woman for an hour and a half every week for almost a year because I had a lot of issues. And I like to talk, and we never got into the meat of the matter too often, quickly. And after that, the rage just dissolves away. Now, do I
Mm,
still get triggered? Yes. Do I still get angry? Yes. But I get a hold of it a lot faster, so I don't say things that I regret later.
mm.
I can say, I'm just feeling really angry. I need to step out of the room
I love that.
and
It's
calm myself down. So that's when I decided to study emotional freedom technique, get certified in it, and add that to my repertoire of things that I do.
I love that. And another thing that Michael does, which I'm a huge fan of, and in fact, I consult my tarot somewhat frequently if I'm going through something, is using tarot. And Michael also does readings. And for those of you who don't know what tarot is, and Michael, I love your definition of it, but I always feel like what I would define tarot as, just kind of simply put, is it's a deck of 78 cards. And it's said that the whole spectrum of potential human experience is captured within the cards. So the cards that you pull at any given time just speaks to the experience that you're having in that moment. And the reason I'm saying that is a lot of people, when they think tarot, they're like, oh no, I'm Catholic. I don't do tarot. And I'm like, Catholic, what? Like, It's not voodoo or anything. And people would say, well, I don't want my future read. I don't want to know what my future is going to bring. And I think to myself, I don't know. I mean, I guess some people read it past, present, and future, perhaps, but the way that I've always looked at it is to awaken something in the present moment so that the experience that you are having in that moment might be called up in a new way for you to be able to process something different or think something different. And I always say the tarot never lie. The card that you pull, you might think it's the wrong card or whatever, but I don't think there's any such thing. So I'd love to hear your definition of like how you see tarot and how you use tarot along with all of these other tools that you have in your toolbox.
Cool. Well, I like your definition.
Thank you.
I'm not a fortune teller, and the future is a spectrum of possibilities. So sometimes there'll be a card at the end of a reading that might point to the outcome, but it's the outcome if you continue on this path. I like to think of it as what's the gold in your life that's sitting under the surface that as you become aware of this and heal what needs to be healed, it can awaken.
Mm,
So I'm not going to say you're going to meet the, the love of your life, but maybe that card may indicate that you can become ready to meet the love of your life
mm,
in a place. So to me, again, tarot 78 cards divided into major cards called the major arcana, which is your complete journey through life, your hero's journey, which is major events, and then the minor arcana, which what's the word I'm looking for? Corresponds to like a deck of playing cards. Those deal with every day. And the cards themselves are referred to as keys. So when I do a spread, it's a mandala of your life so that you can look in the mirror. And looking in the mirror, you get to realize something about yourself that was hidden. So clarity and direction are the prime focus that I have for you
mm,
in a reading. And then I discovered something really cool in the readings that I do, and I think it has to do with intention, is that healing also happens. I learned that when I studied Akashic record readings. The teacher always said healing energy comes in with the spoken word. I
mm,
said, well, if that's true with Akashic, why isn't it true with tarot? So I started to do something. I had an experiment. I took my pendulum and I used the pendulum to assess people's chakras. Those are the seven major energy centers. They're referred as seven major aspects of who you are. And I would have them think of their question. What is the subject that they want to talk about? Do they want me to help them look at relationships, what's going on in their career, their living circumstances, whatever it is that they wanted, but just a major category. And when
mm,
they thought about that, I'd measure their chakras, and some of them would be blocked or closed or spinning in reverse, which
right.
means instead of taking in energy, it's just spewing, it's sort of depleting them. I do a reading, and then we would check their chakras again, and they'd all be open.
Mm.
And I said, wow, there's something here.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done tarot readings and you somebody's pulling their cards and you're sort of explaining what those are and then suddenly you're looking across the table at somebody that is about to burst into tears. And you're like, "Oh, yeah, so tell me what this is." And they kind of share where they're at and it makes sense to them. Like sometimes I'm not sure, I don't really know them or whatever they're doing and you're, like, "Do you have children?" And you just start to ask questions that seem like, well, it's not just about one card. Like I love doing when we're at the retreat, I love doing an opening circle where we sort of set an intention. Why are you here? What is it that you want to get out of this time together? Because it's this closed environment of an intimate group. It's not a lot of people. And I always hope to give everybody a little bit of what they want, but nobody knows what you want until you actually energetically set the intention and bring it forth. And then I pass around the tarot and then we spread them out on the floor and everybody picks just one. And what is
Cool.
and then at the end, when we close the circle, we do the same. We all pick one, and I also ask them to write down if they know that they have a limiting belief. and at the end of the event we'll burn it in a fire. And but what I find is after burning that in the fire and then pulling that last tarot, it is like a cleansing, and there's always a story from point A to point B in even a single tarot. But when you do a draw and you're actually doing something, it's not just about a card, it's about how you've laid them out and how one reflects on the other. Do you do tarot in that type of way also?
I do. I'll do a major spread,
And
11
what is that?
cards.
11.
Uh, 11 cards. I'm using a woman whose oracle deck I own called it's now called the Cosmic Cross. So
Mm.
like a Celtic cross, it has an extra card and slightly different meanings of the different cards that I pull. Some of them are
Mm.
the same, and I'm really enjoying that because it talks about what your soul wants you to know, some of your soul gifts. So not just the hopes, fears, what's blocking you. So some of the standard stuff too that some people may be familiar with.
Mm.
I'm not here to impress people with my great psychic acumen. So I think of this because I want you to gain clarity, direction, and healing. So if you're shut and don't want to answer any questions, then I'm not going to get that much information. But I think of it as a sacred dialogue between me, you, and the cards, which is
Mm.
the
That's
world of
beautiful.
spirit. And if we're in a sacred dialogue, as a healer, I'm helping you realize something about yourself. Because if I tell you what direction you need to go in, it's not as powerful as if you discover it for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a sacred dialogue. Again, I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not here to tell you the future or to tell you what your aunt's middle name is. I mean, if I could do that, wow, I wouldn't need a deck of cards.
Totally.
So, but I'm here to help you, and doing it that way, it's the readings have been incredible. Um, when people don't want to tell me anything, I have no idea how the readings go. And sometimes I get a call from I got a call from a husband. I was doing a reading for this woman, and he was there. And later on, he said, "Yeah, I didn't want to tell you, I didn't want to say anything in front of her, but you were dead on." And she was like this the whole time. So, if
Yeah.
you want to get the most out of your reading, let's have some fun. Be willing to open up a little bit.
Yeah, I
And
love
you
that.
can see I've got plenty of cards.
Oh yeah, I know. I've got so many up there, vintage tarot. I like the Tenenbrough deck that my friend John Mahoney is an artist, and he created a deck of cards you can pick up on Etsy under John Mahoney. A little shameless plug for him. I love his deck. I don't think I have it here, but I also do things on alchemy and astrology and basic tarot and it just shamanic cards. And I find them, I mean, not just fun. I find them really intriguing how sometimes I pull cards and it's almost like I don't want to hear.
Oh God.
I don't want to believe what I've just pulled, but it's like, all right, like I say, the tarot never lie. They're going to tell you exactly what you need to hear in that moment. If you're open to whatever it is that is sort of you know, the it's like you never really see like when somebody says, "Oh, the ocean is so calm." I said, "Well, perhaps it looks calm on the surface, but the undertow can sometimes be quite intense, even when up at the surface it doesn't look so much. Like there's a lot of motion." And I think there's something to be brought up to our attention with the tarot, and I always find it to be just fascinating what it brings up and what can almost quickly be resolved with it. I'm curious, when do you ever do EFT and tarot together, or do you keep the
I
two mixed?
can if people come to me and they say, my life just isn't working and I don't
Mm,
even know where to start.
mm,
I said, well, let's start with the tarot and let's do a reading, see what comes up, and then we can figure out what that piece of work is where we can dive in with emotional freedom technique. Or sometimes I'm working with somebody doing emotional freedom technique. We've cleared a whole bunch of stuff. There's still something going on. They're not quite sure. I said, well, why don't we try a reading and see what that unlocks?
mm.
So I like to, often people know exactly my life is not working and I want it to be this way, and it's not. And so with the EFT, what I do is I'll start off with if I could wave a magic wand and you could be living the life you choose, what would be true about your life? And we'll create an affirmation that we know is not true because they just said, if we could change your life, what would be true? But then I say, well, what's the yeah, but that your inner critic is saying?
Mm,
I'm living a life of joy and abundance. And my inner voice may say, yeah, but you'll never get ahead. You're not good enough. Then I'll ask them, well, who taught you were not good enough? And then we start to dive in like a miner. I start looking for that mother lode and we start to clear that energy. And I always come back to that affirmation. I call it my working goal. And when we can get the working goal from not being true to being 100% true, then that piece of work is done.
mm,
And the neat thing about emotional freedom technique, they did a study um, in PTSD, two studies in PTSD. One study showed that they cured it in 85% of combat vets with 6 sessions.
wow.
And a second study, they were able to cure 90% of children who saw their families slaughtered in Rwanda of their PTSD. And a year later, it was still clear.
Mm.
So when we do clear things, it stays clear. And if it doesn't, it means that there were other aspects of those memories that we didn't get to yet. So now we have another layer of the onion.
Yeah, that is really a great image. It is, peeling the layers of an onion. That one thin layer that you might pull back suddenly exposes a strong, very tough surface that may take a little time to find those thinner layers and peel and peel and peel away. But I think you're right. When you get to the core of what the problem is, of why you haven't grown, whether it's because of shame or a lie or an untruth or whatever it is, and you can break free of it, which is sometimes very difficult, sometimes almost impossible without feeling like your whole life is going to be destroyed by speaking the truth, right? And so I think sometimes I say to clients, whether you tell the truth or you lie, you might get in trouble. But the best kind of trouble to get in is when you tell the truth.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
big thing to think about.
And you're living in integrity with yourself.
Yeah.
If I'm authentic, then I can sleep at night
Yeah.
because I'm being who I am. If I'm trying to be somebody else, then it's going to create disharmony, and that's how people get sick. There's
Yeah.
enough stress out there as it is, but then always trying to wear a mask, never being vulnerable, never telling the truth. It it wears. It wears, and that's why people are so unhappy with whatever job they're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really being able to live your true life is sometimes hard, and sometimes you can move past it, and sometimes you need to stay right where you are and churn a little more until you can get there. I get it. So Michael, before we see one another, which I can't wait to have a nice warm embrace with you. Um, I always ask everybody that comes on Anatomical Gangster the same question, so I'm going to pose it to you. So the question is, if you could tell somebody something that you know or that you've learned in your life that maybe they might not know about, but if they did, it could very well change the course of their life, what might it be?
Whew,
I know, isn't it a great question?
that's a great question. Neil Donald Walsh asked a question like that on an interview. So yeah, I would say that everyone, we are all born as an extension of the divine source of all life.
Hmm.
And I believe we were born to be creators and experience that divine spark. And when I can learn that and know that, it doesn't matter if I'm making money, not making money, in the ideal job, not in the ideal job, but I become a creator in my life because I acknowledge I always have choices. I mean, I could choose to go to work on Monday or I could choose not to go to work on Monday. But I know if I don't go to work, I might get fired. But that's okay. That's my choice. If I can be okay with I always have a choice And then if I acknowledge that I'm divine, I acknowledge that you're divine too. And if I do that, I might treat you kinder because we're made of the same stuff.
That's right. We're all made out of stardust, right?
Isn't that beautiful?
It
Yeah.
is. And I always think we are. It's like 9 billion people on the planet. It's God experiencing itself in 9 billion people, 9 billion different ways. And isn't that the point of the human experience in and of itself?
Yeah, there's a Hasidic saying, when God looks at the world, God sees God looking back.
Yeah. Yeah, both the good and the bad, right? I mean, I think when everybody says God is good, God was kind of mean in certain scriptures. Like there were some pretty hard lessons people had to learn, and I think that's it. Is if life is supposed to be all roses and easy, that we don't. I don't know if the actual experience of all of the spectrum of being in skin could actually be achieved. You've
Yeah.
got to have every person is going to have some struggle. And I think to myself, some of my friends who have kids who are in their 20s saying, I don't know what I want to be. I'm going to mess up my life, this and that. And they're so depressed. And I think to myself, I remember being in that exact same place and going home to my parents completely depressed, shattered. I had gotten fired from a job in casting. My hope and dream of what I wanted to do was changing. And my father said, Why are you so sad? And I thought to myself, I just thought by now I would have had like, $150,000 job, maybe a driver, have a nice penthouse. He's like, Why would you think that? And I was like, I don't know, because you told me that. And he's like, I don't think I ever said that. I don't know if that's true, but I just thought by my 20s I would, you'd go to college and then you'd go with your life. And if anybody is listening to this who is younger, I would just say that anybody who is in their 50s or beyond saying you should have it all figured out by the time you're 25 is lying to you. The whole experience of being in your 20s is really about exploring what you like, trying different things, and realize that you might get fired at least once from a job in your 20s. Because I think if we took a poll, probably most people would say the exact same thing, right?
I was still in school in my 20s, so I can honestly say I wasn't fired.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
yeah, that was, I went back to school and kind of, was like floundered about, not sure where I wanted to go even there. I mean, it was just a bunch of malarkey. I don't know.
I would say you don't start to figure it out until your 60s.
Yeah.
Well, and I still don't have it figured out. I'm still working on it. And
Yeah,
it,
if anything, you just care less about what other people say about you as you get older. And when you get into menopause like me, it's like you forget a whole bunch of stuff that maybe at one point sounded important. And now I'm like, I don't even remember what you're talking about, kind of a thing. So maybe things bother us less as we get older simply because only the important things really remain and all the other stuff just kind of can move along and not be so all consumed, right?
yeah, for me, it's about connection.
Indeed.
Joy, connection, and magic. How do I bring more joy, connection, and magic into my life?
Indeed. And I think that to the whole world. How can we all come together and love one another more and be more joyful and spend more days happy than we do sad? I hope that that's a good message for anybody to hear today.
Well, it starts with tarot to gain clarity and direction, and
Yeah,
then EFT to then start to clear all that. Because if I could
totally.
love myself first, then I could love you more.
Indeed. Well, I love that. And on that note, I'm going to say farewell to Michael and to all of you. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. If anybody needs a little bit of a helping hand, certainly seek out Michael. Michael, if people want to find you, how are they going to find you?
My website's real easy. It's my name, michaelbilkis.com.
So, so
MichaelBilkis, as in Sam.com.
I
And
will
I've got
certainly put
all
it.
my information on there.
I love it. Well, I look so forward to seeing you in Costa Rica and seeing what kind of magic we can conjure up. And for everybody else listening, be happy, be healthy, be well, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Sue. Love you.
Adios.